I just wanted to encourage you today with this thought. We all know that life can be challenging, and what's challenging for me might be easy for you. What's challenging for you might be easy for me, whether it's overall or just for that moment. And what I found is that many times when we are setting goals to change something about our health, about our physical or mental health, there's something that needs to be changed that was picked up at a point in time. The habits we have now, they just didn't pop into our life overnight. We might have done something or taken action on something like that quickly. However, the idea, the awareness of it, those things were planted long ago. And so when we go through a struggle, we take a look at what we have available to help us to get through. And many times, because we're not used to, or we haven't received the example of how to give it to the only one who can bring healing and turn it around for our good, because we haven't learned that, because we don't have that type of relationship, because it's something we're not even aware of, something we maybe just see as a cliche, or something that we might think that we're doing that we're not, which is very common. I've seen that in different situations. We might think that we're giving it over to God, but really we're not. And so I want to bring attention to this, because when we get to a point, or when a person gets to a point to where they want to make a change, what I've found in many situations is that this thing that we need to change, that there's a root of it. And that root started, that habit, that idea, that drawing towards this activity or this mindset, this action, that it happened during a time of stress. It happened during a time to where there was negative stress, maybe abuse, misuse. There was maybe abandonment. There was anything that's in opposition to what God's original plan was for us. Anything in opposition to His goodness. When these things happen in our life, maybe death of a loved one, the loss of a job or a home, or the loss of a friendship or a pet. All of these are losses, I want to say. And sometimes we kind of, in society will say, oh, this one is just common, or this one, so we don't pay attention to it. And when we don't acknowledge it, we also miss out on seeing what it is that we did in that situation. Like what action we took in order to get through. And these things we do in order to get through, these are the things that later on lead to the unhealthy condition of our lives. And so when something is painful, something is traumatic, don't try to brush it off. And I see this commonly encouraged with, for males and females. But for males, there's sometimes this push to suck it up. You have to be the protector, it should look this way, or get through it in this manner, or this coping mechanism is acceptable. And then these things later on turn into they end up being detrimental to our relationships and our health. And so I want to bring attention to that, because you don't want to neglect what's going on with you on the inside. And I see this in families and in relationships. It's just this idea of, oh, I'm good, and you're not really good. Now, I'm not talking about just vomiting over people, because then that will continue to keep those things in your life. because you're expressing something without acknowledging the source of the answer. Okay? So I'm not talking about that, someone that just says everything. No, that is not helpful either. But what I'm saying is, if you ignore it, or if you do something to numb, or to not acknowledge how you really feel, that's going to end up being detrimental. And what happens in those situations is that the things that we later on want to change, the habits that become so challenging to break, they're that way. They are that way because we ignored and didn't address and tried to, quote unquote, push through a situation, but we never dealt with the hurt. So if I have a broken ankle and I say, well, I'm just going to go ahead and continue the race, and I'm going to run on it. I'm going to continue to ride my bike. I'm going to continue to walk on it. Guess what's going to happen? It's going to get worse and worse and worse. It needs to be addressed. And that's no different than our emotions. They are valuable. Our emotions, they feel, they're a reflection of the perspective that we have of a situation. These are not things to just throw aside. They are motivated by thoughts and beliefs. And what we believe is going to move us in a direction that our life goes. And so they also cause these habits that we later on need to break. Or sometimes we don't. Sometimes, individuals will just die with it. But that's not the way it has to be, because you're still alive today. So what I wanted to say and encourage you to do is that don't ignore these times. When something is off, when your body is sending you signals, your stomach is upset, you can't sleep, don't take a drug to cope and get through. Acknowledge it. Find out what the root of the issue is. So many of our physical illnesses are linked to our psychological condition. They're issues of the heart. Things that weren't taken care of earlier on in life. And those things are important. They're significant to the outcome of the rest of your life. And they're so important, maybe even more than you, to God. And the thing is that there is an answer, and He made a way for the healing. Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble, but be of good cheer. I've overcome. So all the madness, all the things that God didn't originally want us to have to come against, but our free will put us in. Well, guess what? He still has a way of escape out of every situation. Those things. Don't ignore those things. We don't have to. I don't care if there's no one around you that will acknowledge where you're at. God does. And He'll send you to a completely different surrounding and change, most importantly, the inside of you. He will supply your needs, and He does this from the inside. And so don't ignore those things. These are the things that come back up. These coping mechanisms, drinking, drugs, bad, unhealthy relationships, all of these things. There's so many different things. You might use reading as a coping mechanism, but it might be unhealthy for you because you're doing that instead of dealing with what the real issue is. And that's very common as well. Many times we'll do something that's acceptable in our social setting. However, it's causing us more and more pain and destruction and harm because we're ignoring the thing. You see? And so don't look at the action and say, oh, what's wrong with that? It's okay. It's no big deal, Oh, I'm just gardening, or I'm just reading a book, or I'm just going for, well, I'm just exercising. Well, if you're doing that instead of dealing with the issue, then it's still harmful. Because while you're doing that, the real issue is still festering and getting worse. So acknowledge where you're at, acknowledge the emotions, acknowledge when you're hurt, acknowledge where you're at. Don't ignore it. And then sit and take it to God. Open the door for the answer to come to you. Don't just grab the closest Twinkie. Oh, let's go out to eat. You know, sometimes coping mechanisms. Oh, you're so sad, honey. Let me give you a lollipop. I don't know what it is. I just can't eat sugar. Well, there's some comfort that you have with that thing because love was expressed in that manner. And that's the case with many individuals that have a hard time breaking free from certain things that they eat and certain things that they do. There's something attached to it. So pay attention to where you're at. Take it to the only one that can bring you through and heal you. And allow yourself to progress through it without picking up a habit, an addiction that later on ends up hindering you in life.